Folks, welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, the NBC Network, the Podcasters channel with your host, Hurricane H. Today is a very interesting topic because the topic we're going to talk about today is a kind of touchy-feely one, but I think it's worldwide and everybody kind of maybe falls into this, thing. And I'm being intentionally suspenseful because I want to get that excitement going on here, but really it is a form of addiction. We've talked about quite a bit of addiction. We've covered alcoholism, we've covered drugs, we've covered a lot of different levels of in different topics and different types of shows. But today my guest is someone who's really advocating and educating people about a very unique type of addiction that is almost innate in the human nature. And I'll leave that to that level. So with me I have Logan Hufford, who's actually a sexual addiction mentor. Now, as it sounds, sex addiction or pornography or porn addiction, these are real addictions that are out there in the world. And it's somehow some people can justify it as being human. It's human nature at its best, right? Or maybe animalistic nature, but it is real. And it is damaging. It can affect people. And actually, we did allude to this in the previous show in mental health, that's a form of addiction that is pretty cool. It attracts people. It gets your high. There's a high to it. And there's all kind of stuff. But our guest today is Logan, is going to take us to a journey, his personal journey, and why he changed his path and how he did it. Through religious, belief, through other, formalities, whatever it is, we're going to learn about it today. And, and I want to say this, folks, I don't care what your denomination is, what location in this planet is. This is something that I think everybody can, benefit from as a discussion. It is a little, taboo in some circles, but frankly, it is needed to have a discussion about. And certainly we'll have guidance about it. So, hey, Logan, welcome to the show, man.
I appreciate you having me on, brother. And the reason why we need to talk about it is because it is taboo, right? I mean, I'll just say that right now, like, because it does tend to be something that gets swept under the rug, that if I do have a struggle, if I've got shame in this area, well, I can't talk to my friends about it. I can't talk to people about it. I can't learn, with healthy resources the way that I can with maybe alcohol addiction or other struggles. So absolutely, I appreciate you giving me the platform to talk about it and to shed light on this.
Well, we are about health, physical and mental, and this definitely falls into that realm. And it is actually it affects your health, it affects your sometimes wealth, it affects your relationship. We've had marital discussions and shows about relationships. It affects your relationships because through adultery and infidelity and all this stuff. All this stuff is real, and people struggle with this. And and I love what you said. This alcoholism is acceptable to a degree because it's kind of like people can talk about it, right?
Right.
People drink, but a lot of people are not really keen on sharing. Like, hey, I'm having affairs, I'm doing stuff, I'm having orgies, whatever it is they're doing in their world in this stuff. Where they're addicted to their computer and checking out all these pages and stuff like that. That's out there. There's plenty of stuff, and we could talk about historic stuff that's always been there. It's pretty interesting. So Logan, let's talk about what really got you into this addiction, how, if you don't mind, and then certainly how did you discover that because anybody who has an addiction, chances are they don't know that they have an addiction. I mean, they know, but they don't know. They know, but they can't admit it. They know, but there
are way more addicts than there are people who say I struggle with addiction. Like that's the bare minimum way to say it, right? I mean, absolutely.
Get it, man. Tell us about the story and how you discovered that you really got into this form of addiction somehow. And I think through you, a lot of people will be like, I think I'm in that world too. I'm in that world too. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, okay. And one other thing I'm just going to say, because if anyone's still listening, but maybe they're on the fence about like, okay, I don't think this would apply to me. I don't think I got anything to learn here. Here's my challenge to you. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't struggle with this, I've never had a struggle with this, you might be right. If you are one of the lucky few, because I'm telling you right now, you are in the minority, if that's the case. If you're one of the lucky few who does not struggle with pornography addiction, with sexual addiction in general, I promise you have multiple people who are in your inner circle who do struggle. The general number, depending on how you quantify addiction and what study you're looking at, the general number is 7 out of 10 guys struggle with pornography addiction. 7 out of 10 guys and 3 out of 10 women. So if you don't personally struggle, good, but still learn from it, because you've got people that you love, that you care about, who do struggle. I promise you that. So my story, I mean, to be honest, I'm going to do something kind of weird, and I'm going to start my story by really starting at the end, which is to answer your question about when I realized that there was a real problem. So I'm 34 years old now. This is, picture me 9 years ago. I'm 25 years old. I've been married for a few years, for 4 years at this point. I've already got 3 boys, and my wife is pregnant with our 4th son. We got married young and started having kids young. So married for 4 years, we got 4 boys, 1 inside her tummy. And I've had multiple sexual affairs over that period of time from the time that we first got engaged all the way through to this point in 2015. I have been addicted to porn this whole time, in addition to the sexual affairs. I'd hired multiple prostitutes. The self-hatred, the shame that I lived in, because here's the thing, I wasn't just like trying to escape my life, or, I couldn't handle having a family and I wanted to escape it. No, I wanted desperately to be a good dad. I wanted desperately to be a good husband. I loved my wife. I was very attracted to my wife. I loved my boys. I wanted to be a good man, a good family man. But I had gotten myself so trained, and I emphasize, I got myself. It wasn't anyone else's fault. It wasn't the disease of addiction's fault. But I made so many bad choices over a long period of time, to where my MO, my way of dealing with life, had now become almost a second nature. And it wasn't completely automatic. It was still my choices, but that's what addiction is. It has become muscle memory. It is almost to the point where it's automatic. And so, yeah, it's still a moral choice, but it has become part of my limbic system. And that's something that most people, myself included, before recovery, do not understand about addiction. I take extreme ownership over my choices, and yet at the same time, it became, from a physiological standpoint, it became harder to make a healthy choice the further into addiction I got, because I had literally rewired my brain in a very unhealthy, very corrupted way to chase after those dopamine hits, to chase after the high that I would feel. And when I'm talking about dopamine hits and highs, I'm not even talking about the sexual activity. Like, yes, there was the physical thing that I was chasing there. Sure. Most of the high that I was chasing, it was all of the extracurricular stuff around it. It was getting the text back from a woman, the forbidden fruit, right? It was, waiting in the parking lot, waiting to meet up with somebody and feeling terrible, but I also felt an adrenaline rush. All of those things provided these hits, these highs, that I didn't start off chasing that, but it eventually got to the point where that stuff, I wanted to keep chasing it. I wanted to keep chasing it. And with pornography, there was some of that, but there was a whole other thing, which was, and this is why I talk so much about porn. I don't just talk about pornography, but that it's the big focus of what I do in recovery and on Instagram and stuff, is talking about the dangers of pornography, because pornography teaches me that I can have whatever I want to look at whenever, right? I can pick and choose how many, what's the hair color, what's the ethnicity, whatever. I can pick all that. I can control it all. I can decide it all. And then I want to stop, or I want to switch to a different website, or I get to choose it all, right? It's like, giving a little kid access to a candy store and letting them, live there, except it's the X-rated version. That's what pornography does. It's, to put it very lightly, it teaches me to stay immature for a very long time. So going back to, to answer your question. So as a 25-year-old, hating myself, hating what my life had become, but feeling like I can't stop. My wife then gave me an ultimatum. She had known about the infidelities, but she's in survival mode, right? We got 4 little kids, she's pregnant. She's trying to just take care of the family. And by God's grace, she had the strength to face her abuser, me, and say, okay, I'm done. If you do not get serious help, like I'll give you a chance to get serious help, but if you don't get serious help, then you're going to lose me and the boys. And I knew that she meant that. I believed her. So that started my journey to reach out and try some resources. It was a very 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, non-linear type of journey. Because I'll tell you right now, my sobriety date was almost a year later. That was the summer of 15. My sobriety date is May 19th, 2016. I didn't start getting serious traction from, staying away from pornography and all this until 2016. But I started to attend groups. I started to reach out to people. I started to do some things. And there was a lot of like doing the bare minimum. Okay, like let me just try to manage this, right? Because I didn't think I could ever not be in bondage to it. And yet, my Instagram handle is no longer in bondage, because now, by God's grace, almost 9 years later, to be able to say I'm Logan Hufford and I'm no longer in bondage to sexual addiction, brother, I didn't think I could ever say those words ever. And I'm at this point, I'm here, to shout on any rooftop that'll have me to talk about, hey, God put these people in my path. He put this recovery program in my path. He's given me these tools to be able to not live in that cave anymore. And whatever I can do to share these tools with other guys, with other folks struggling, I want to do it. I need to do it.
Well, so first of all, I have to commend you for being this brave to really share. This is probably one thing that in anybody's closet, this is the laundry that no one wants to actually share with the world.
Sure.
Right? It's a fact, right? I mean, like you said, your statistics are pretty scary, 7 out of 10, in guys, and 3 out of, and by the way, I want to talk about that ratio, because there is a natural factor between women and men in terms of their addiction with the sexual, I guess, feelings, right? We're just right. Two different beings, 2 different ways. Our dynamics are different. And so it makes it, and it's a fact in reality. Right? But, so again, that you're very brave to actually have faced this and, taken care of it, but also taking the journey to help others, or at least, make people aware of what it is, and, and so on and so forth. So you've touched on a few things. First of all, you said it wasn't so much just the act or the outcomes,
right.
It was really the adventure of it, like the thrill that you were getting, and literally, it's like a kick, right? And you said it, like the dopamine, the adrenaline kicks, these things were like, just, you're doing something like this is like, interesting stuff, different, right? You almost like technically playing with the devil, if you would refer to it, but really playing with the law, because we're talking about prostitution and stuff. There's a lot of factors, disease, there's all kind of risk factors that are attached to this world, yet people still do, and it is actually, there's industries that are literally, that cater to this. I mean, just as there is alcohol industries and tobacco industries and drug industries, there's an industry for this. I mean, whether from film, as you said, pornography, it's accessible. And even before the internet, you had it. This is like one of the oldest. Prostitution is the oldest, profession in humanity, right? And
right.
and sex is something that is innate. It's like something that is natural, and so it's primal, in terms of our, I guess, wants and needs as humans.
It's a natural urge.
It's a natural urge. So it's like wanting to eat. Sometimes that just people have different levels of, right. I don't know, hormonal, activity that kind of get them in the libidos, whatever, get, better than others, I guess. And that's, there's also, literally hormones that are in action here that can make some people a little bit more aggressive than others, and so on and so forth. But all this is real, and it's scientific. It's there's a mental factor, there's a physical factor. And as you said, the easier it gets to people to have access. And now it is actually in our palms. It's everywhere. Back in the days, you had the video stores. You would go to the back room, and and they still exist, I think, in some parts. Remember, I don't know, you're young now, but I think you've caught up to the VHS and DVDs and stuff, era, and those things were available.
No, I'm an interesting age, because I'm younger than, I'm 34, so there's plenty of guys in recovery that I've connected with that are older than me, but I'm old enough to where, I also grew up in a relatively sheltered upbringing where, we didn't have Playboys laying around. So I grew up, there were no iPads, right? We're talking late 90s. There's no smartphones. There's no, it was dial up
All
internet.
America.
And to use the internet, you got to make sure nobody's on the phone, right? Like porn was not accessible. Definitely not in my house. But that's kind of the whole thing is it wasn't specifically about porn. It was feeling a rush. But the first thing that I ever taught myself to use as a sexual stimulation, the first time I sexually objectified pictures of women was through JCPenney catalogs, the lingerie and swimwear ads. That was the first time I sexually objectified pictures of women. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what the feelings that I just knew I liked how I felt. And so, by any sort of definition, that's not porn, right? But that was my introduction to it. And yeah, I'll use like this analogy when I'm saying it's not about the sexual activity. Like I'll put it to you this way. I mean, hopefully this will make a little bit more sense to anyone that struggled with maybe a different addiction or even just understands something about addiction. Yeah. Are there alcoholics who love being drunk? Sure. But alcoholics, as a general statement, they're not alcoholics because they just love to be drunk. Or they're not alcoholics just because they think that whiskey is the best tasting beverage. Like there are plenty of people that do enjoy the taste of whiskey. There are plenty of people that do enjoy being drunk, but that's not why they're an alcoholic. Or a different way would be if somebody's a smoker, you're not likely to find a bunch of people who are smokers specifically and only because they just love tobacco. Like that's just their favorite thing in the world. No. It's a whole thing. There's a social connection, right? There's triggers. There's things that, okay, something's happening. Now I want to go have a smoke. Something's happening. Now I want to go have a drink. Oh, I'm with my buddies. We're going to go do the fill in the blank, whatever. And it's no different with a sexual addiction, except it looks very different. It's something because of what we talked about, because of the whole, it's kind of in the closet thing. It's something where, yeah, I wasn't doing things largely out visible to other people. It was all hidden. It was all shame. It was all a secret double life. But, I would have a stressful day at work, or I would have a low paycheck. I was in sales. I would have a small paycheck or whatever. Instead of me wanting to go get trashed at the bar, I would go off and look at porn in the bathroom at work, or I would go hire a prostitute, or I would go start texting, somebody in my phone and hope that it would go somewhere. Like that's how I dealt with the stressors of life. Instead of going and picking up a bottle of Jack, I was watching videos on my phone. That was my coping mechanism.
Again, Logan, what do you listen? You're talking about the real stuff. I mean, when you're talking about alcohol and tobacco, there's addictives that are I guess intentionally put into this product, so they actually work your body. Right. In pornography, maybe there's nothing it's not edible, but it is subjected to you. You're basically suggested these things through visual, arousement or enhancement, whatever you want to call it. So it is actually giving you a kick in your mind. And it's the same way like we get, high from a movie and, you're getting excited about watching something or listening to something. It's the same thing. And then, of course, there's the physical piece of it that aligns well with that and it kind of satisfies, the human needs, right? And so there's that. But again, going back to, like you said, in the era that you were, growing up, it was still not sophisticated to the degree today, right? But at the time, there were toll-free numbers that you can call. You had the Playboy magazine, you have different magazines. I mean, even old movies. If you look at movies 70s or 60s, they have pictures in the movies or like posters and things like that that kind of introduce some of this. And that's the thing. It's like it's been introduced in the culture, slowly but surely. I mean, if you go back a century ago, even the dress code out there was different. People were more, covered and so on and so forth. And it became a little bit more liberal and things got shorter in the women's space and the guy's space. And it just became like, it's so cool, like, it's my life, I'm free and so on and so forth. And I get all that, but it got away a little bit from the religious aspect. So, cause again, and we'll talk about religion further, but in general, it was, looked at the wrong way. I was just I was just kind of catching up on the Patriot, the movie, right? It's with Mel Gibson. It's an iconic movie. So I just stumbled on it like a week ago or something. And it's funny because there's a scene about, the son meeting this girl and they had to get permission to actually even meet. he was wrapped up in a freaking bag, and sewed in, because he was spending the night over. And it's just like to show you like how historically, we
Right.
were and where we are today. Now it's just like every movie has some sort of a scene, into it. So it's becoming like very common. And so it's normal. It became normalized. And therefore it became a little bit more acceptable to everybody. Yet everybody knows, nobody's like, hey, listen, I'm going out there, I'm doing my thing. Now there's a lot of places where, as you said, you can get a hit. I mean, you get out of the, there's after hour, or like, business hours, and there's go-go bars, and there's different places where you can go and really kind of, even just peep places. I mean, literally in
Right.
those adult, stores, right? So there's all kind of stuff. Now someone can say, Hurricane, you know about this stuff. Yeah, I've been around the block long enough to know a lot of things. So
Right.
just for those people that may question that. And but fact is, this is real. And
Yep.
people, it's a struggle, by the way, men and women, because some of these places they're frequented by both, genders. So it's not even like, who is, one versus the other. Obviously, men may have a little bit, as you said, 7 out of 10 versus 3 out of 10. There is a difference in just how we operate. But you're right, like, there is something that was kicking with you, like it was just like making a difference. Now, my question to you is this: it started at what age? Because I want to address the age piece, because a lot of parents are fearful about content, and
Yep.
you can see it. I mean, you mentioned PG. You and I were talking about this before. In the movies we have PG-13, we have different ratings, and then of course
Right.
you have X-rated movies that don't even make it to the movies, right? But
Right.
the fact of the matter is, these ratings are there for a reason, and so depending on the stuff, and then when you're talking about things that are online, I mean, Google Master. I mean, there's no, YouTube is clean, but like if you go to Google, I mean, it's, do whatever you want. I mean, it's all open territory, right? And so you have all these things. So who stops, kids at early age to do stuff? Now with kids today
Yeah.
having a phone at their disposal early on, and you have all different measures, even TV, like back in the days on cable, you have these permissions and passwords protected stuff, even,
Right.
so there were means, but they're not really strong means. I mean, even back in the days, you could get, all these channels and things like that. Even pay-per-view has that stuff, that you can buy. You go to a hotel, you have adult channels and stuff. So it's
Right.
always accessible. And so if you have children, and the reason I'm asking about the age, because there is a point in life where the kids kind of open up their eyes to this world.
Yeah.
And there's like seeing, the other gender, the other sex, and it gets a little, now when you see things, you start giving you some nice little excitement in your mind, and you want to explore these things. And one thing leads to the other. Same thing with tobacco. It's like, oh, let me test that, the little cigarette. Let me have a little sip. And that's, it becomes, a cup, and a cup becomes a bottle, and the bottle becomes a pack, and the rest is
Right.
history, right? And same thing, one cigarette to a pack to like an addiction. Now you have drugs and so on and so forth. So it gets, and similar here in your example. So what age did you literally start entertaining these thoughts? And because, and we want to spend some time on that, just so we can share with people maybe what can we do to help them at least understand what to look for in terms of, because you obviously went through this and your parents may not have even caught up to you. It seems, maybe that's the case. I don't know if they
Yeah.
were aware, they were not aware. And you can share with that, whatever you can share. Of course, this is your life. So, I'm not asking, anything that you're not willing
Yeah.
to share with the world. So,
Yeah. So I've answered this question many, many times, and I don't have an exact age, but I'll say 10. It was about 10 years old. In terms of when I first started chasing that high of sexually objectifying pictures of women. I know that it was way before puberty. I didn't understand how sex worked. I didn't understand, the differences between a male and female body, to any sort of degree. It was just like, I was just like a little kid, and like, oh, okay, like I like how this looks. And then it was around 13 that I discovered masturbation. And shortly after that, maybe 13, 14, when I first started addictively watching online pornography. And it was very rare that I ever had the opportunity. But when I could, I would, my dad was at work, and then my mom would be at a doctor's appointment or something. I would sneak onto the computer and I would watch videos. But it was, it might have been something, there might have been times where it was like, twice in 1 year that I'd get the opportunity to do that. It was not super common, but it was already to a compulsive level where if I had the opportunity, it was a given that I was going to do that. And to be honest, that pretty much stayed the course or got progressively worse for the next 12 years, because by the time I was married, if I ever was away from my wife, away from responsibilities, for more than an hour, I'm probably going to be going and looking at porn. I'm probably going to be, seeing what I can find out there to feed my addiction. And one thing I will say in terms of as a parent, because we got 4 boys. My boys are 12, 11, 10, and 8. So we're right there in it, right? I mean, these are the ages where they're going from little kids who just want to play with Hot Wheels to, okay, I've got a crush on so-and-so, or, oh, I want to go do this. And I'm not going to pretend one bit that I'm an expert or that I've got it figured out. But here's where me and my wife, here's how we approach it. And yes, I'm saying my wife, that's a whole other part of the story that we can get to, is we are still married. And yet it's only by a miracle. And I can talk about what that miracle looked like. But how we approach parenting when it comes to this stuff is I got no clue the perfect way to keep them from something or to make sure that they're prepared for something. But one thing that we can do is to have constant conversations about life, to just make sure that those communication threads are open. And we don't do it perfectly, but we are very intentional to talk about life with our kids. We don't generally have private conversations where our kids are not allowed to talk with us about something. Like, we don't invite our kids to talk with us every single time my wife and I sit down. But if we're talking at the dinner table and, our kids are already done eating and we start to talk about a heavy topic, we don't shuttle the kids off, or we don't necessarily go to the bedroom and close the door to talk, because it's like, hey, we're talking about real life. So if they want to listen in, if they want to talk to us about it, no problem, because it's real life. Why would we not want to include them in real life, right? I'm not saying that we don't ever have private conversations, but we don't generally. The other thing is when our kids ask us questions, we talk to them about it. We don't make up those little white lies that I think are very much normalized with parents about oh, I don't really want to tell my kids about how the real world works, so I'm just going to, joke about this or joke about this. It's no, we don't, I call that baby talk. We don't do baby talk in our family. Again, do I talk to my 8-year-old a little bit differently than how I'm talking to you? Sure. But I'll tell you right now, it's not that different.
I guess
it's real life. Our kids, they know our story. They know that dad was unfaithful. They know that dad struggled with sexual addiction. And on one hand, it's a beautiful thing in the sense that because they know the full story, they know what redemption looked like. They know how hard we worked individually for our own healing and together, in our marriage. They know how hard their mama worked in her recovery, her healing journey. They know, what I've done to work on healthy habits and all these things, and how I work with men now. They know all that stuff. It's also led to some uncomfortable conversations, some uncomfortable questions. There was something just a few months ago where I was talking with my oldest boy, or we weren't actually even having a conversation yet. But something came up about kissing, and he was like, oh, so you talking about kissing? My 12-year-old was like, so that's what you were doing with those other ladies back when you used to, when you were cheating on mom? That was not comfortable for me to answer, right? That was definitely a hard conversation, but I'm so grateful that he felt free to ask that question. I'm so grateful that he felt safe, asking his dad that. And the other part is, there's not going to be a point where they grow up and they're 20 years old or they're 30 years old and they're suddenly they find out this deep, dark secret about their parents, right? I don't ever want that to happen. It's no, right, wrong, or indifferent. You're going to know, what your mom and dad have been through, and you're going to know the tough lessons we've learned, and the areas where I still screw up or the areas where I still struggle. I'm going to be very open about those things. I want my I want my kids to look up to me, but I want them to I don't want them to look up to me just because. I hope that they look up to me because they see a man who is genuine and honest and willing to work on himself. And if they can look up to that man, then I see that as a good job.
Well, Logan, thank you. I mean, there's just quite a bit there. One is the idea of early age. I mean, you said around 10, and today, I mean, even in elementary school, there's sexual education, so they start way early. I mean, it's not even at an older age when you're a teen or so. This is like, I'm talking about you haven't even hit fifth grade, right? So this is becoming more common, at least in the States. So that's a big one, right? And so kids already are kind of aware of things, and so they start kind of the path of discovery, if you want to call it that way. And of course, if you remember way back in time, I mean, schools were boys' schools, girls' schools kind of thing, right? Stuff like that. That kind of changed over the decades, and now it's all common and everybody does whatever. I mean, my kids are, one is, just graduated high school, and the other one is graduating this year. And they tell me stories about stuff since they were in middle school. Kids are pregnant and so on and so forth. So sexual activity is pretty alive in early ages today. I mean, literally, it's amazing, right? Things have changed a bit, and also the access, as we said, is a lot. You had maybe far in between opportunities to actually get online to even sneak into. Most of these kids today, unfortunately, they have their rooms, they close their door, and it's very difficult to stop. And everything's password protected. They have their own logins in their phones, and you can't even talk to. And let's be clear. At least in the States, very difficult to actually force a kid, for example, let me see your phone, let me see this. I mean, there's child services. It can be perceived as an abuse. There's all kind of stuff. Now, as a parent, we want to protect our kids, and there's that fine line between how you do it, where you do it. Right. Your approach, which is being kind of open about your past and stuff. And by the way, I want to say this, and folks, if you're watching and listening, what Logan has been through, some people say like, well, he did it to himself, whatever. No one picks an addiction on your own. It's something that just happens, and then before you know it, as you said, you're into this, and it is very difficult to come back. Now, you wanted a family, and you got the family, but you can get rid of that whole decade plus of your luggage, and it's an illness technically, right? That's what addiction is. So you had that, and it's very difficult. Now your wife, I don't know if she knew, she didn't know at the time, when she met you. Now that's the other thing. There's a big factor. If she knew, it's one thing. She didn't, it's another, because now she discovers this new personality that you have, and that makes it difficult. But I have to say, I mean, she stood by you, and the ultimatum she gave you was probably the wake up call, like, hey, smack, get up, smell the coffee, smell the beans here. You're on your own, and you're not going to be part of this family. Now that kind of was and sometimes that's exactly, it takes a very rude awakening to a lot of people, especially when addiction, to actually make that transfer, the initiative, to take the initiative to make, the necessary changes and taking the steps to get out of it. And you said, it was back and forth, 2 steps out, one step back, whatever. A year later, you got it. And by the way, there's no one that can tell you like, hey, I just woke up and it's over. It ain't going to be over, because the temptation is going to be there. Go ahead.
I will say, I've definitely heard that. It's 99% of the time, it's from somebody who's like, it's their second week at recovery. And they're like, oh, I feel so bad. I'm never going to do it again. Like, I've already talked to my wife and let her know I'm never. It's like, okay, like, you might believe the words you're saying, but because I've been there. But guess what I did a month later? Guess what I did 6 months later? Guess what I did 2 weeks later? I did it again. Because if nothing changes in my infrastructure, if nothing changes in my brain patterns, if nothing changes in how I deal with life, I'm going to go back to the same. It's like a rut in the road that's just going to naturally take me where I've always been going. So people definitely try to say, oh, I'm healed, I'm good. And I've heard stories from folks who actually have stayed away from whatever their addiction was. People that, hey, I was an alcoholic for 20 years, and I'm making this up, but like this type of thing, right? It was like I was alcoholic, and then I got a DUI and I almost killed somebody, and I never touched a drink since. I believe that those things do happen, but they are exceedingly rare. That it almost never happens that way, where I just choose to turn off a limbic behavior that has been created, that I've hardwired into myself over the course of years, and I'm just not going to do it again. Because that toggle switch doesn't exist, not generally.
Oh, so we can cross that line, since we're in this discussion right now. So your wife gave you the ultimatum. You
Yeah.
seek the necessary assistance and help, and it did work out. And you start work on your relationship. Now, as you said, those infidelities or their affairs, were they really affairs? See, that's the other thing that people sometimes may not understand. To you, they were not affairs. It was not for love. It was just to satisfy an addiction. It's like having a hit. Again, I don't
Well,
know. I don't want
right.
to judge, but
There were different types. And I can expand on that. Yeah.
sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So a couple things. Like you and I talked off air. I'm extremely intentional about how I talk about my past because I don't ever want to glorify my unhealthy behaviors. I'm not here to share war stories. That's not what I'm about. I did terrible, despicable things, and I own that. So I'm careful with my verbiage. When I say like sexual affair, or sometimes I'll say sexual encounter, what I'm not trying to do is minimize. I'm not trying to be vague to hide anything, but I also don't want to be triggering as much as possible, right? And my point is not to build excitement with my story and sensationalize it. Most of the sexual encounters that I had with real women were what the general term would be hookup, right? And I hate that term, but that's what it would be. It was I want to chase after this thing, and again, the thing being like the dopamine hits and all these. And then once it gets to fruition, which is okay, now there's a physical connection. Well, now I want nothing to do with this person because now I'm feeling all the shame. I'm feeling all the self-hatred and depression and oh my gosh, I'm such a terrible person. I did it again. I can't believe it. All those negative feelings are just like piled up and there's no more high. So I want nothing to do with that person. That was a very common cycle. There's a whole part of recovery. It's the relapse cycle. And that's a big part of it is, it builds and builds and builds and builds. It's like this giant oval. And when it gets to the point of acting out or, physically involving myself with somebody or looking at porn, whatever, after that period, there's a huge letdown period. And usually I want nothing to do with my addiction. The problem is that only sticks around for so long. It might stick around for 5 minutes and then I start chasing after something again. It might stick around for, 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months, but it's not going to stay forever. Eventually I will start to chase after it. But the physical, the physical connections, the physical affairs, they were generally about attention. There was some chasing after the physical, the sexual, but it was also a lot of the attention that I was chasing after that. Power and control that, I want to dominate the situation. I want to be in control, just like I did with porn. I wanted to be able to do that same thing with a real woman. So, I wasn't going to, this is a really blunt way to put it, but it's honest. I didn't generally chase after somebody who was not easy for me to control. Here's what it was. I was a predator looking for easy prey. That's a terrible way to view people, but that's truly how I viewed women. So I didn't want to have to put in a ton of work. I was going to go for somebody that seemed likelier to give me what I wanted. And there's whole, my whole infrastructure, when it comes to my addiction, I built up in that way, some of it intentionally, some of it unintentionally, or some of it subconsciously. But there were a couple, like really, I would say there were 2 women where I was chasing after the attention, I was chasing after the physical, but I also there was a strong emotional connection. And those 2, especially the last affair I ever had, those were really hard for me to truly break from because there was the emotional connection. These ones were different where I didn't have that experience of I want nothing to do with you. I had some of that, but there was enough of an emotional bond built up that I did want to continue having a friendship or something. And so it was even as much as all the other ones were destructive, all the other ones were evil. This was even more destructive because there was some of that like relational glue built up. The last affair I ever had was one where it was not a one-time thing. It was a month-long affair. And it was extremely difficult for me to break away from that, far more than any other relationship I ever had.
Logan, listen to you. I mean, and probably our listeners and what, and viewers, that, when you have a lot of, you watch shows about relationships and, infidelity and things like that. You mentioned something about, finding a connection or finding, somebody that the attention, right? A lot of people start with just that. I mean, that's all there is. Maybe at home, they're not, and by the way, male and female here. So let's be clear, husbands and wife, you'll be surprised. I mean, the balance in terms of who cheats on who, but the fact of the matter is, it is real. It happens, and there is a reason for that. Maybe there's a lack of things, and we've talked about this, and we have also podcasts out on the network that kind of address a little bit about the relationships and how things happen. But you have that, and therefore someone starts kind of finding things outside of the household, right, or after the marital, I guess, realm, and then therefore now it starts with, it's a casual encounter, like you said, a hookup. It's a good, I'm just having a good time, and it doesn't mean anything, right? Then, as you said, now humans are humans, feelings occur, and now you get attachments. Now it becomes a little bit more difficult, and that's where the problems happen, and so on and so forth. So now, and by the way, I'm not, glorifying as in any, shape or form here, or I'm just trying to kind of put this on the table here because, people judge people in general. He cheated, she cheated, and so on and so forth. But nobody knows really what's going on in the household. I mean, is the relationship really smooth? Are there, different problems in the house? It's a healthy? Is the sexual piece, happening, and so on and so forth? All these things, like, maybe to men is different than women, and that's actually even a fact scientifically. Right. So is there a compatibility? All these things sometimes do happen, and a lot of relationships also start just with that. They wind up in a marriage, and they don't last long because they were not really built on true emotions and stuff. So all this stuff, and we're not going to relationships now and that kind of thing, but we're talking about it is a part of it because it affects this, right? Now, in your case, you found someone that was willing to give you the second chance, and you worked, with her to do this. Especially, I mean, you have 4 kids, I mean, and the 5th on the way. Now, obviously, the 5th.
Well, sorry. So we had 4 kids in terms of the 4th one was in her tummy. So we have 4 boys total. Yeah. Okay. Three boys that were crawling around, and then the 4th one inside. Yeah.
And this was when this all happened. So right, yep. Correct. Yeah.
She was pregnant or already had kids through most of all of the affairs. Yeah.
Now, again, I mean, can I ask you a question? Did you, in your redemption and treatment, did you seek any assistance, any mediation between you and your wife, and also just, some mental, sessions and stuff? I mean, again, I don't know if that's something you want to, answer or not.
But, no problem. Yeah. And as with everything I've shared to this point, at least, this is descriptive. This is accurately descriptive of what we did. This is not necessarily prescriptive of what I think you should do, right? I mean, there are some tools and some things I'll share that I think are prescriptive, that are general, good tools. But so me and Carrie, my wife Carrie, we never went to formal counseling. We did a ton of I'll say counseling work in our recovery programs. They were not lightweight programs. But we never did sit down with an LPC and dive into this stuff. Not at all saying that you shouldn't do that. Most of the folks that we work with in recovery do meet with a therapist. There's different ways to find people, that have healthy tools, that can give you healthy tools. And of course, it's not a binary thing. Do you do this or that? A lot of people do. Yeah, let me do both. Let me do recovery and find a therapist. But I did heavy therapeutic work within the recovery program. I was in a 2-year, essentially voluntary house arrest program that was hours of homework every single day. Sorry, it was homework every single day, hours of homework every single week. It was a phone call I had to make every single day to another recovery brother, multiple recovery meetings with my mentor and with groups every single week. My wife was going through sexual betrayal trauma healing through her recovery program. So she is doing deep dive work with ladies that have been where she's been. I'm doing deep dive work with guys. But one of the beautiful parts about the work that we were able to do, the people that we were introduced to, we didn't just, and I always highlight this when I talk about recovery, we didn't just meet people who had been where we were at. That is a big thing. Like it's a beautiful thing to struggle and to feel like you're the only one. And then suddenly you're introduced to a group of people who share your struggle. That's awesome. But that doesn't necessarily bring about any healing, because all that does is, the way I think about it is like, okay, so I'm not the only one trapped in this cave. There's other people trapped in here too. So there's some camaraderie, but we're still all trapped in the cave, right? But here's the beautiful thing about the recovery infrastructure that we became a part of was there were multiple people on the other side of healing, multiple people who had experienced years of healthy living, years of recovery. So they weren't just able to say, hey, I get it, I understand the struggle. They were also able to be like, yeah, I've been there, but I'm not there anymore. Let me show you the roadmap to, how to get out of there. And that was a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you. What you're doing right now is exactly that, in a different way. I mean, you're using a different platform that is also now available to people. So thank you for doing that. Now, what? By the way, I appreciate how you kind of broke that down, because you're right. There's different ways to kind of recover, and as you said, some people do multiple kind of combinations of things that can help, or you can just do one versus that, whatever works on both sides. But what I like about this is that both of you kind of were determined to maintain the relationship, and work together towards. I mean, your wife could have said, you know what, the hell would you do? I'm out, you did me wrong, and that's it. But she didn't. So right. That's a great woman there in a way. And some people can say, well, what kind of woman is, people judge, unfortunately, a lot of things. But here's the thing. No one can judge other people unless you're in their shoes. So if you're not in the shoes of people, I don't think you step. But again, folks, we're not here to give you our personal opinion about how you want to, you're running your life. But certainly, let's just be sensitive to every person, because again, no one chooses these things. There's a lot of dynamics in this world that make things the way they are. And we're going to touch slowly. We're going to start emerging into like your other level of redemption through religion and finding God and so on and so forth. Because here's the thing, folks. In this world, there's some solid, religious denominations that are pretty, ancient, right? And I think all these religions have few things in common. And one of them is fornication is forbidden in a lot of the texts and the books and on the religious, beliefs. And so, unfortunately, I think in modern society, we have been so far apart from those texts and books and beliefs and practices that these things are now easier to be, fallen into, right? Yep. And it's really, as it's the work of the devil, as, I don't care what religion you probably can relate to that, this terminology is used. Yep. And so, it's the old sin, right? I mean, it happens. It's something that exists. It is in all the scriptures, where you cannot, fornicate, you cannot have sin, or and have sexual, affairs outside of marital status, and so on and so forth. So, but because we've come so far away from those basics of protective, tenets, which if we do, life will be easier, right? Because here's the thing. When you work in the realm of outside of religion, you're open territory. All the sensations, all the sinful stuff can be there, whether it's from gambling to, people commit murder, commit crimes, commit stuff because they're outside of the realm, religious, doctrines, right? If you're in a religious form,
my morals have to have a foundation to put it simply, right? If my morals have no foundation, then who's to say, my right is your right, your wrong is my wrong, So,
well, again, what I'm saying is that historically we had these ancient texts and practices, that proved good over centuries, or millennia, right? But as we got, into the new age, new modern stuff, these things have obviously throughout history we do have instances of where that wasn't, the case. I mean, from the Roman Empire to the Greeks. I mean, there's all historical stuff that shows that people did all kind of crazy stuff, orgies, and you name it. Sex was rampant in the Middle Ages, and all the stuff. But the fact of the matter is, as people get religious, part of any, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and in other denominations, it's very big as a component to be wedded, to before you actually, consume, a relationship and so on and so forth. But that's become now almost like, it's like, even let's call it blunt, for the kids that they're like, oh, you're a virgin? Ooh, she's a virgin. She's a virgin. Right. I mean, we hear those things. I mean, it's almost like, sin if you are these days, right? It's the opposite, right? Things have changed. So therefore we're open to an easy, prey, if you want to call it ourselves, to all these sensations and the temptations, right? And so, as opposed to having some sort of controls. Now, if you have fear of God, for example, you probably will be refraining from doing things. I mean, whether it's cursing or stealing or cheating or being, lying and so on and so forth. People tend to be a lot more scrutinized that way because they have a belief system that gives, as you said, the moral compass is there. So it's different.
Right.
Now, you have found some of that through somehow. Was that through the process of, regression or redemption, or was it just like, as you were doing this, you kind of like went into that path so you can help yourself? Was it a
Right.
tool, or was it actually the venue?
Honestly, mine is kind of unique in this way, in that I definitely I would not say I found God in recovery. I would not say there was no knowledge or education that was part of my recovery process when it came to Christianity, when it came to religion. I was raised in, to be honest, I was raised in in a lot of ways, the type of home that I want to create for my own family. I was raised in a really good home where I felt loved, I felt safe, but also we were, Christianity was not just a cultural thing for us. It wasn't just like we go to church on Sundays. We did do those things, but my parents did a great job. They taught us the Bible. They taught us scriptural truths. They taught us, principles to live by. And a lot of that stuff I've kept with me, from my childhood. But it's also a reminder that head knowledge isn't enough to save you, right? Head knowledge is not enough to keep somebody from going off and doing stupid, in my case, right? I'm the type of person who, generally speaking, I got to like touch the stove 5-6 times and get burned 5-6 times before I stop touching it. And so it wasn't enough that I had memorized Proverbs and that I had gone to church and I knew I could tell you the gospel, I could recount all that. And I believed it in my head. I believed those things to be true. But there's never been a day in my life where I didn't believe that God was real, that Jesus came to earth and died for our sins. I just felt like I'm too screwed up. That I guess that's not going to be for me. I'm too jacked up. I've missed the boat. So that's where I was. Because when I talk about self-hatred, when I talk about depression, like, I'm not mincing words. I wanted so badly for God to just take me off the earth. I wanted so badly to have never been created. And yet I was never willing to, push myself off the edge, because the way I looked at it was like, well, I know where I'm going to end up, so I don't want to do that. So even in the darkest of, no, you're good. Even in the darkest of places, I still believed like biblical truths, but what happened in terms of religion has been a huge part of my recovery walk. But I don't even like think about it as religion, just because I think that is kind of like a stuffy word. It's like, no, what happened was God used the recovery process and people that were part of my recovery walk to lead me to a place where I could even go, okay, I can have a relationship with the Creator. I can have a relationship with my Savior. It's not about me being perfect. Yes, I'm accountable for my actions, but I am called to something greater. And, my past does not have to define my future. My past matters, and my past is real, and consequences are real. But an incredible part of my life that I'm so grateful for every single day is that the very thing that kept me in bondage, the sexual sin, the sexual addiction, sexual infidelity, all this, the very thing that kept me feeling like I was the worst human to ever walk the earth, the worst dad, the worst husband, God has equipped me through recovery to take that and now like use it against the enemy. Use it to help other men because it's given me a platform to speak from. And so the thing that was my prison, sexual addiction, has now become something that has equipped me greatly. to be a better dad, to be a better husband, to be a better man, because I know what it is to struggle. I know how much I'm grateful for every single day, because I know how much I don't deserve my family, So like I could go on and on just on that one piece. Like motivation for me, one word, gratitude. Because I'm surrounded by things that I should, by my own merit, I should have lost. And yet, God has chosen to allow, to give them back to me. I'm so thankful for that.
Oh, so that's a huge word, one word, but it's a powerful word. Gratitude is I mean, I think if we all practice gratitude, we'll be better beings as a whole humanity, right?
Yeah.
Gratitude is a big thing. Being thankful, being grateful for who we have and what we have, at all times, and yes, I love what you said. Yes, you were raised in the environment that was fairly religious, but they didn't stop you. And by the way, you're not the only one. I mean, 90% of the people that probably have addiction, any type of addiction, come from environments where the addiction is forbidden. Yet they fall into it. Because again, if you think about it, if there is a good power, which is the power of religious, belief, then you have the power of the evil stuff, right? And so those two energies kind of go, side by side and facing each other at all times. It's the old fight, right? And so that's the thing. I have a joke about it, like devil doesn't go with people that don't have faith. He wants the people that have faith to remove them from faith. Right? That's his work, right?
I'm with you on that. Yeah.
It's a real thing. He's not busy with the one that are already done. He wants people that are kind of like, oh, we believe. Okay, well, if you believe, let me get you from you believe, because that was his own thing, right? So the fact is, and by the way, this is true in most of the religions, beliefs. So it's not even just Christianity. Whether you listen to the show in parts of the world that may not have Christianity, this can still fit in, equally into this, because this is humanity, right? And right. So, but I love what you said, that the idea that you were able to kind of work through this, and you worked, and people in your life did not bail on you, and that's actually a big thing. You still have a family now. Obviously, it's been a minute, a long minute, journey from where you were, where you stopped, and now, so that's my question to you now. And the hardest part about addiction is that people are afraid that they'll be exposed to whatever they're addicted to any given moment. If you're smoking, you can be smoke free for years, and you get into an environment where smoke is relevant or prevalent, it may be a problem. You get into a bar for whatever, you get a tense situation, and you get that sip, and now it's over. How has it been? How difficult has it been for you to maintain? Because I think that's the hardest part about anything. When you recover, it's like, you can never be in front of such a thing, because if you are, you're vulnerable to this. Well, at least you were. How do you do that? How can people even prevent themselves from falling into that again once they get clean?
Yeah, that's a powerful question, and the answer will depend on the guy, because there's multiple guys that I know of who have 5, 10, 15, 20 years of sobriety and healthy living. It would probably answer that question a little bit differently in terms of, do they still struggle, or do they still feel vulnerable ever? But across the board, I would say this is true of anyone I know in the recovery program that I'm a part of, anyone who's got 8, 10 years of sobriety. And definitely this is true of myself. The answer is yes, I do still struggle, but I don't struggle. It's not even the same ballpark. It's not even the same league as what a struggle was 8 years ago, 9 years ago. Because I'm faced with things every day, of course, that are a trigger, or that are a possible trigger. A huge part of my recovery work now, starting this year, is going on podcasts, and then doing Instagram work. Going on to put content out there. Just from a visual perspective, Instagram's it's filled with people trying to get attention, right? So it's filled with stuff that absolutely, in my addiction, could have taken me down in a hot second. And so I'm super intentional about how I approach Instagram, how I approach visually, what am I clicking on, and how am I responding, like all of that stuff. So number one, I go in very intentionally with boundaries, accountability. Every day I'm accountable through various things to recovery brothers who know all my stuff. They know my whole story. They're free to ask me any question. They're free to give me feedback and advice. And I'll tell you right now, I get annoyed sometimes. Like, man, what? You're badgering me. And then I remind myself, if the price I pay for safety, if the price I pay to be able to thrive in life as a dad, as a husband, as a man, is that occasionally I get annoyed by an accountability question, that's okay. I can deal with that.
That's being accountable.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If you're never annoyed, if you're never frustrated by an accountability partner, you probably need a stronger accountability partner. That's just the tough truth of it. So there's a couple different ways I'll answer the question, which is, yes, I struggle, but not nearly as much as I used to. But I do always recognize I could get back to the place that I was if I chose. And I think about it like this: every choice I make is one more brick that I'm adding to a foundation or to a wall, right? It's like, so what kind of foundation do I want to build? So if I choose to, watch something on YouTube that, okay, it's not pornography, but it's really not the thing I should be looking at. It's not the thing that I should be feasting my eyes on. Okay, maybe that in of itself is not going to send me spiraling back to what I used to be 10 years ago. Maybe that by itself wouldn't be cheating. Maybe that by itself isn't porn, but it's definitely one more brick, right? Or this movie that I want to watch that, okay, yeah, there's this sex scene and it's like, I can, just skip past it or whatever, but well, maybe just don't even watch it, right? Because it's just one more brick. Do I want to be laying that brick or not? So healthy bricks, accountability, right? Being honest, owning my stuff, like those are healthy bricks. And on one hand, I mean, yeah, I can definitely mess up my life and destroy my life with one single choice. But most destructive things in life are not that. Most destructive things in life are not single choice actions. They're series of choices. They're things that have taken place over the course of months or years. And so me maintaining safety, me being healthy, it's reframing how I'm, viewing the world around me. But I do hope that I can give some encouragement that, yeah, by God's grace, I'm so thankful to say this, that I don't struggle nearly as much as I used to. And when there is that trigger, when something does pop up, I'm able to view it. It's almost like I can push pause and go, okay, here's something that's a trigger. Here's something that might be a temptation. Well, how do I want to react to it? Again, it's like which brick do I want to lay? And in my addiction, there was none of that. It was like I was living in the fast lane, going 100 miles an hour, just being compulsive and impulsive, making the decision that felt right in the moment, or, going with my muscle memory, limbic system only, right? And so now it's not that I'm perfect. It's not that I don't get tempted, but I don't rely on my limbic system to make all my choices. I can actually, use the old prefrontal cortex and make healthy, moral, right choices. Again, not perfectly, but over the course of my life, I'm generally making, more right choices than wrong, as opposed to the past where it was just flying by the seat of my pants, doing what felt good in that moment.
I think what you're describing really is you're trying to you remove yourself from the equation of anything that could be a risk factor. One, two is you are in a position like everybody else that may not have an addiction, right? Because technically anyone that is not addicted to porn or otherwise, they all come close to these things. But then, as you said, what's holding them back is that they have a different way of thinking of things and they look at it this way. So you basically are, I would say, normalized to the level of anyone without addiction. Yes, you're a little bit more vulnerable in a way because you've been there and you know what it feels like, it tastes like. But certainly you're in control enough that like anybody else and anyone else that may not have an addiction, because still, as you said, if you put enough bricks there, you probably fall into that same space. This is not like oh, let's laugh it up. These guys, bro. I have to say, we never judge people for what they're going through. Whatever people are going through, they're going through, because it's not like some people's like, well, the choices you make. Yes, you're right. The choices you make. Sometimes it's a series of things that just add up, and before you know it, you're in this nice little twister. It's very difficult to come out of a twister or a rip current, whatever. I mean, first of all, you have to be aware that you're in a twister. or a
Right.
hurricane or something. And sometimes you're not, you might be in the eye of the hurricane. You're not, it looks good, but it's really surrounded by all bad stuff. So you don't know what's going on. By the way, hurricane, I didn't mean it that way. but you know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is, like, what you are saying is really true. And I love the concept that what you said about also being checked by your accountability, partners and brothers. That's important. Now, I have just a question. I know we talked a lot more about almost guys stuff, but in
Yeah.
the system, or at least the programs that you have, I'm assuming there were members of different women, men all together, or were they separate? How does that work? Just for our audiences that are or women, what does
Yeah.
look like for them? I mean, is it similar? I mean, is there anything different on their world that you have been exposed to? Because I'm sure if they're in the program, they'll be suffering from the same thing. So what
Yep.
do we say to them?
Yeah. That's a huge one. And I'll be honest, it's one that a lot of work still needs to be done. There are resources for women who struggle with porn addiction, women who struggle with sexual addiction, but there are far fewer than there are for men, because you're right. The struggle is different. And so the resources, they're going to be different. And then, of course, just given the nature of what we're dealing with, I would say, ideally, a man should not be mentoring a woman who's struggling with sexual addiction, or vice versa. Even with like AA, they generally try to avoid that, for all these obvious reasons, right? And so, like for the group that I'm part of, which is, by the way, the group I'm part of, this is a ministry only. It's not what I do for a living. Prodigals up here in Alaska. So we're a local group only. We don't do anything online. We're not doing courses or anything like that. There's a few different groups in Anchorage and in the Valley. And these groups they are men only. I know that there have been some requests for a group to start for women who struggle. And that's something that, like one of the churches here in Anchorage, they have been working on, is to try to build that. But it's a tough one, because again, they want to find somebody who has experienced some healing, some maturity, but ideally who is a woman, who can walk with those struggling. Just to give a tangible resource, though, a couple of them. I have been blessed to connect with a lot of folks, both in this space and also not in this space. Folks like yourself who have me on to talk about various things. I've also been on podcasts that are specific to sexual addiction, specific to Christianity, various things, right? And so one of those people that's awesome, who I can definitely connect people with, Anna Murby. If you send me an Instagram message or give me a follow, I've tagged her in some posts. We've collaborated on some stuff. Similar to me, she doesn't do this for a living, but she is somebody who's very open about her own story, that she struggled with porn addiction. And she is somebody who also, has experienced healing from that. So that is one person, that, she's only her, she's only one person, but, she's somebody that can be a resource if people have questions. And then, the other thing is Pure Desire Ministries. They have a lot of great resources around this, whether it's for men who struggle, women who struggle, or also for my wife's end of things, for the betrayal trauma healing. So Pure Desire Ministries does incredible work. If you just Google Pure Desire Ministries, there's various groups and books and stuff that'll pop up, or give them a follow on Instagram. And I always emphasize, like, resources by themselves, they're not going to matter unless I want to seek healing, right? You can recommend all the books and all the groups and all the therapists and none of that's going to matter if I'm not willing to do hard work, or if I'm not feeling broken and desperate enough to seek those resources out. So I don't necessarily emphasize a resource list as the be all end all, because somebody's got to want it, but resources do matter. So yeah, give me a follow, give me a message on Instagram if you want to be connected with Anna. And then, also just check out Pure Desire Ministries if you want more information on any end of this spectrum.
Well, Logan, thank you. I mean, the work you do is really sharing. You are a resource, at least, because people who will follow you, they will know the struggles and stuff. You also have different connections that you have made that can help and
Right.
assist, finding a way out of this. And by the way, thank you for trying to clarify, the idea between, women, I guess programs versus men programs. And by the way, when you talk about sexual addiction in today's space, it could be men, men, women, women. There's all kind of
Right.
levels, so that could be dangerous either way you want it, even within one group.
Yeah.
So again, it is just, it's an addiction no matter how you slice it, right? So it's very difficult. So I think there's got to be a way to help people get out of this, and certainly ministries do a terrific job about these things, and I think they have availability in all kind of, any church or religious system probably has some level of potential help that can guide people. That's one way to do it. I'm not sure, but
Well, as a sadly, not nearly enough, and it's very common, especially in churches. To be honest, this is kind of starting to go away. But as somebody who grew up going to church, and I had a great relationship with my church, this is a common. If anybody's been a churchgoer for a long time, you've probably experienced this. There can be this sentiment within a church that it's like, well, you shouldn't need any of this mumbo jumbo psychotherapy. All you need to do is read your Bible more, be a better Christian, love God more. That's what you need to focus on. And it's like, I should be those things, yes, but I also need to do I need to do the tangible work, whether it's recovery program, therapist, whatever, of rewiring my brain, right? Of building healthy habits, healthy infrastructure. So again, it's not one or the other. It's like, I need to be doing both of those things, the spiritual and the physical tangible.
Oh, sorry, you made me smile because what you described here is the same thing. Like, it's like telling someone who's really sick, well, all you have to do is eat healthy. Well, I can do all that stuff once I figure out my sickness.
Right.
I got to fix my illness first. I got to fix, and then I can go to preventative stuff. No,
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? Because I mean, what you're describing, that we should all be doing these good things, right? But unfortunately, when you pass that point of no return, you're already in the disease mode, or or the sickness or illness. Now you got to fix that, and that's not going to be just because you want to believe, because if that was that easy, it would have been. Now, of course, belief works, but you have to get out of it, because the whole idea is that you are so far apart now, and you have all these anchors that are guiding you and pulling you in the other direction, opposite of where you're supposed to be. So again, like everything else, we if we can get the default right in the first place and maintain it, that's great. But a lot of us today are kind of deviating from that, and so we need that assistance. And you know what? The more resources, the more help we can have, the more at least being open to discuss these things sometimes is just the key. As you said, a lot of people may not, state it, but they may be going through the same stuff. They just don't know about it, or they know about it. They don't want to share with anybody, because it's hard to tell people, hey, listen, guys, this is my problem.
For sure.
People will probably make fun of you or judge you or whatever. You lose friends. It could be, a disaster, because now your spouse or significant other can have a very bad reaction. You try to solve problems, maybe avoid. It can be a lot of things. Now, obviously, we're not going to solve that today, but certainly being aware, that's the first step. Seeking the help is the second, step, I think, based on all the processes that I've, talked to about addiction. Those are the key elements, and being willing to take, the necessary steps and maintain, because this is not a quick fix. This is a long journey, and, you cannot relapse. You got to continue. And so you have to put all the measures in place to prevent it. And as you said, you can see triggers, but you avoid being even in the presence of those triggers, because that's the way to actually do it. Like literally, if I have an addiction with alcohol, I'm not going to hang out in a bar. I mean, let's just be clear. It will already be like defeating the purpose, right? I mean, someone's like, well, you have to have strong will. I mean, I don't care how strong will you are, but if you have all the environment that is completely, going to get you back into it, that may not work. Will alone does not work. But the best will is not to be even in it, right? To just be outside of the whole concept. So it's an important piece. So thank you for, I mean, we've exceeded an hour, Logan, but it's just, it was cool. We've covered quite a bit. Thank you for really coming out and also sharing your life and through the work you do, and really you're helping people avoid where you are, where you were, and really you give them hope that they can do this. And even for those that may think that their relationship and the families can be at a risk, there is a hope for that too. So you're really giving hope to people that no matter what. Now, at the end of the day, folks, we are human, we are sinful, we are weak, and
Yep.
temptation will always win if we don't have the solid, preventative measures, as you said, as the church you referred to. So we need to build our foundations correctly. But even the best of us with foundation can still weaken, and certainly fall into these traps. And again, and these are a lot. We're surrounded by just temptation and things that can get it very easily, whether it's porn here or in the sexual, discussion, or it could be, again, drugs. This gambling is another big one. Now you have.
Oh, I had a huge sports gambling addiction. That was a whole part of this. Is it wasn't just one addiction; it was an unhealthy, double hidden lifestyle that was all these things mixed together. Absolutely.
But gambling could be just like it's funny because for every place you gamble, like if you have problems with gambling, call the number. But I mean, it's like this cigarette causes cancer. I mean, given a disclaimer, it just takes the liability away, but doesn't take away the problem, right? People will still struggle with whatever it is, and if they're cold, most people are not going to do it or admit again that they have an addiction to start with, right? They don't know that. All they know is like, I lost money, I want to bring my money back, and that cycle doesn't stop. So again, that's just another example. I mean, there's plenty. I mean, shopaholics is real. I mean, people that spend money on buffing the house is real. Oh, yeah. There's so many addictions, and right now we have people that are addicted to their phones. They can't remove themselves from social media. Believe it or not, this is real stuff, folks. And so you addressed today one element, which is a big element, and it affects all humanity, I think, as a whole. So thank you for doing that and coming on.
Yeah.
And again, so you said your handle on Instagram is
No Longer in Bondage, and there's periods in between the words. I think if you just search No Longer in Bondage, I'll come right up, Logan Hufford. But yeah, my handle is no.longer.in bondage.
I'll have the link in the description of the show so people can link up quickly to you, and then they can connect with you, and you can guide them, you can share with them, you can help them. Certainly that's the great work that you're doing. So thank you so much. So since we come into the end of the show, what would be some words of wisdom to just leave our audiences with right now?
Whenever I'm asked this question, I usually come back to the same thing, which is my mission on this earth. Like, I firmly believe, like, why God, created me and put me on this earth. It's not to keep people, to explain addiction, to scare people so that they don't ever fall into it. No, like that would be great, I suppose. But my whole mission is so that somebody can hear this, watch this, see me on Instagram, whatever, and go, okay, I've already done all that stuff. I'm struggling right now, but they can be like me and go, whoa, other people have gotten out of the cave. Other people have found freedom. And so what I want to leave anybody with, whether you're somebody who has struggled, or maybe you're somebody who has, struggled with betrayal trauma, you've been cheated on, you've suffered that way, or again, maybe just a loved one, right? You're a dad, you're a mom, you're a pastor, whatever. If somebody who has been through this, I promise you there is healing available. There is freedom. There is recovery available. Everyone's path is going to look different. And some people's path is going to be way longer and more uphill than others. But there is healing available for every single person. And that's not cheap words. That's a big promise, but it's a promise that I'm willing to make because I've seen it time after time, people who have gone through incredible struggles, and natural consequences are real. Again, the journey to healing is going to look different for every person, but don't ever think that you have done too much, that you've done too much wrong, you suffered too much, or you've been in this addiction for too long, that you're not going to be able to find freedom. I promise you, if you seek it, you will be able to find freedom. But you got to diligently seek it. It's not necessarily going to be the first book that you read, or the first person that you've listened to on a podcast, or the first program you try. But you got to keep working on it. But healing is available.
Like everything else, right? It's a work in progress. You got to do, take the steps and take the action. There was something that I wanted to just address quickly, because when you mentioned something about you didn't push yourself off the ledge, and you said, I know where I'm going. I kind of laughed. So I just want to clarify, because some people sometimes they get critical and
Sure.
on these shows. So first, let's be clear. When you refer to that, as the thoughts of suicidal, kind of ideation, that's pretty real, and it's happened. We've covered a lot of suicide, shows with psychiatry experts, as well as different, professionals in the area, and therapists and advocates. It is a big deal. People get to that point. But as you said, from a religious perspective, you were there. So I wasn't laughing because, I undermined the idea. I just, laughed as you said that, what the outcome. Now, of course, some people say like, because in the most of us that believe in some sort of a denomination of religion, it is kind of like known that, suicide has a different outcome in terms of, heaven and hell and all this stuff. So that's a whole discussion on its own, whether you believe or not. But that's what you referred to. So that was, because you went there. That's why I laughed. But the fact of the matter, folks, we don't want that in anyone. We need people to seek help, just like, for addiction. That's a big, that's a pandemic that exists, and it's ongoing, and it's actually affecting younger and younger people. So again, for those of you who are watching and listening, if you need more help in that area, please do refer to our shows that have to do with that, or other aspects and shows, out there that talk about suicide. And always 9998, I think, is number for that purpose. So seek the help that you need there. Don't undermine it. It's a big, serious problem. And a lot of people sometimes get to that point and they start thinking about it. In your case, that wasn't the case, because you kind of went back to your roots in terms of religious, doctrine. And you figured out like, I don't want to do this because, and that's a pretty scary thought when you kind of believe that, I might wind up in the wrong place and I don't want to do that. It may be.
And to be honest, for me personally, like, it wasn't even if I make the choice, then like that will put me in hell, because like suicide specifically, I know that is, certain religions, that is a thing. With me, it was just like, well, I'm looking at the evidence. I guess I must not be a Christian, because otherwise I wouldn't be messing up, right? Which is its own ball of wax that I had to work with. Is like, Christians can still struggle, but
everybody does. Well, again, we're human, right? Yeah. So that's the thing. If you exist as a human, you are, not perfect, and sin is around us, and there's temptation, and there's different ones, and there's different types, and the devil works in mysterious ways, and he knows how to do things, to get us. He's got enough expertise. He's been in existence from the beginning, so he's got a little bit, a few years and decades and millennia ahead of us in terms of his plan and work. So it's crazy, but it's real. So from a religious aspect, that's at least one angle. And even if you don't believe, folks, at the end of the day, no one wants to go to that route. Don't end your life, because you're meant to do better in this world. We want you to just strive and do better. And if you're not sure how to do this, seek help. That's the main thing. So again, I just wanted to highlight that, because that's a big point. And although you didn't really kind of talk about it, you kind of refer to it, but I just wanted to touch on it here quickly. So again, 998 number, or seek your local help, whatever. If you even thinking and you have these ideologies or thoughts in your mind, and we all have these thoughts, and some people get them more expandable than the others, and more expansive than others. Don't entertain them, folks. All right. Well, Logan, thank you so much for being with us. And, we spent a nice chunk of time, but it was worth every minute of it and every second, a lot of good, valuable insights, and, through your own experience. So thank you so much, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you having me on.
Pleasure. So there you have it, folks. This is a topic that's probably, again, as we initially stated, as taboo, but, it's only taboo if we don't discuss it. I mean, I think let's make it, a part of our, discussion, and share it. You can talk in your own circles, folks. It is important to don't undermine this discussion, because it is real. It is happening. It affects people you might not even know. If you have kids, they could be the next person struggling with this. You can be yourself, struggling and not even knowing about it. At any given point in our lives, we can easily fall, into this trap here. So do the due diligence. And again, do connect with Logan, on Instagram, and, any other service that can help you here. That being said, I'm American H. We'll be talking soon. Meet any show on the topic. Bye for now.